Welcome to another episode of the Afterlife Podcast. This is your host, Pooja Chilakuri, and today my guest is Steven Russa. Steven is a master spiritual coach, and he has had a near-death experience very recently, and he is here today to share with us his story. So welcome to the show, Steven.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on and sharing. We were discussing earlier how important it is to raise awareness because so many of us are having these spiritual experiences, and so many of us feel like, nobody understands or we're alone. So, thank you for coming out here and sharing. So, without wasting any time, please walk us through what happened.
Well, yes, let me tell you a little bit about me and my story. I came off of a 2 year spiritual awakening. And a spiritual awakening basically is a shift in consciousness. It's basically a shift in your beliefs. It's a time where you really go through questioning who you are, what your purpose is, what your path is, why you do what you do, and there's this overwhelming feeling that there's got to be something more to everything that we're doing, to everything that we have going on. So for me, I'll just talk. My spiritual awakening was brought on by, and with most people, it's usually brought on by a series of incidents that's usually our crises that get us in that shift of mind frame. And I had went through a lot with my wife. I was going through or on the verge of a divorce. I was going through a lot with my son. I had invested in some commercial real estate property that wasn't doing well and it was costing a ton of money, and I was losing money. I was in financial despair. And all of that caused a breakdown and a shift in consciousness. And once I started shifting in consciousness, I started questioning God. God, this can't be what we're here for. It doesn't make sense for us to live 70, 80, 90 years chasing society's ideal of success and wealth and money, and to spend our whole lives accumulating or trying to accumulate this. And there's got to be more to it. So that caused a breakdown for me. That caused a shift in consciousness. I I began to change. I began to seek knowledge. I began to study. I went through what you call the dark night of the soul, because when you go through a spiritual awakening, a lot of times we don't know what's going on. Sometimes we think we're going crazy, or we're having a mental breakdown, or what's wrong with us, and it's hard because you can't really talk to family or friends because they don't understand, that they haven't been through it. You know what I mean? And when you try to talk to them, they say you need to go get help. Something's wrong with you. Go see a doctor. All these kind of things that don't apply when we're going through a spiritual awakening. So I went through what they call the dark night of the soul, which was a deep depression, a deep, you know, a depression, questioning what I'm going through, wondering why I'm going through it, feeling depressed, feeling sad, feeling confused. I would say borderline suicidal. Like I just don't want to be here anymore. I just don't want to do this anymore. And it was a rough time. I had no one to talk to. I tried going back. I have a Christian background. I tried going back to the church. The pastors and whatnot. They really didn't understand it. They really couldn't help me. And whatnot. So, make a long story short, I came out of that, and once you really go through a spiritual awakening, you cannot go back to your old life. You can't do the things you used to do. Those don't resonate with you anymore. You can't hang out with some of the people. Some relationships will fall off because you've elevated to a higher level of consciousness. You can't, the job that I used to do, I couldn't do it anymore. I tried 2 or 3 jobs and couldn't understand why I couldn't do it. It just didn't resonate with me. I didn't feel right. It felt like there's something more I'm supposed to be doing. Everything had changed. The people I hung out with, things I used to do, everything. And people often ask me, how do I know if I'm going through a spiritual awakening? Well, that's one big sign, because if you think you've gone through a spiritual awakening, but you're still doing the things that you used to do, you haven't gone through a spiritual awakening, because you haven't evolved. Spiritual awakening is an evolving of soul, evolving of consciousness.
Mhm.
So after that, that's when I decided that I know I had felt a calling on me, that I wanted to be a spiritual coach, and I wanted to help people that were maybe going through spiritual awakenings. Even if you weren't going through a spiritual awakening or dark night of the soul, maybe a lot of people are just out there feeling lost, feeling unfulfilled, don't feel a connection to source, don't feel a connection to their higher self. They're not hearing from the universe, and they don't understand why. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that you're going through a full blown spiritual awakening or dark night of the soul, but there's so many people out there that are going through this and don't understand why and don't have anywhere to turn. So I said, you know what? I want to be there to support people, to help people, to guide people, to be there, not to answer their questions. There's no way a spiritual coach can answer what your path is, what your purpose is, what you should be doing, but to help people realize that the power is within you. You have the power to connect. You don't need a middleman. You don't need a religious institution. You don't need a man. We're all part of God and from God. So I began getting my certification to be a master spiritual coach, certification in law of attraction, certification in the 12 laws of the universe. Did a lot of studying of quantum physics, a lot of reading. So it got to the point where after I did all this, it was like, okay, God was telling me, okay, now it's time to put yourself out there. You've done your studying, you've got your certificate, you've gained your knowledge. It's time to put yourself out there. Now, the funny thing happened. This really does lead into my NDE and what caused my NDE. Because once it got time to do that, I started to have a lot of those self-doubts, those limited thinkings, those negative thoughts. Can I do this? Do I know enough? What makes me qualified? Is it going to be too much work? So what happened was the ego self started to creep back in. And I had these limited thoughts, limited feelings, negative thoughts. So what happened was I actually kind of stalled. I didn't put myself out there. I didn't create my website. I didn't network. I didn't do any of that because I was scared and that fear came in. So what happened was that kind of led up to the NDE. So my NDE happened on October 9th of 2024. My wife and I live in Carson City. She was in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, visiting some friends or whatnot. So she called me and said, look, I'm going to come back and everything. And I noticed, being an empath and being very intuitive, I could pick up on people's energies and whatnot. So I could tell there was something going on with her. So I said, look, why don't we go up to Lake Tahoe, which is about 40-minute drive from Carson City, Nevada. Let's go up there. Let's sit on the beach. Let's meditate. Let's pray. Let's find a sound bath to go to. Let's kind of reconnect spiritually because I could see that you need kind of recharge your batteries. So she got back. We head up there. Now, something was funny on the way up there. There was a strange feeling in the air. It was weird. And I wouldn't classify it as good or bad, just strange. There was something in the air. So we get up to our room, we check in, we go to get something to eat. So we decide, let's go up in the hills, let's go stargaze. One of the ways that I like to connect with the universe and to calm my mind and to be present, to go up, let's go stargaze. So we went up into the hills to stargaze. Now, this is real important. On the way up there, I got a severe pain on my left side and a severe tingling. And my left arm kind of locked in a C position and I couldn't move it. And it was tingling, it was numbness. So I kind of used my right arm, loosened it up and whatnot. My wife didn't even see what was going on. She was looking at the scenery and the hills and the mountains and all that. She didn't even see. So I didn't want to alarm her, so I didn't say anything. I was like, that's kind of weird. My first thought was a heart attack. I never had a heart attack or symptoms, but I had read about people and I know the heart's on the left side. And when you have stuff going on the left side, it could be associated with a heart attack. So we got up there, we began stargazing. So as we're stargazing, that's when we saw the little white dots in the sky. My wife saw it first. Now, we weren't too far from the Reno, Nevada airport. So we saw planes in the area. They weren't airplanes. They weren't drones. They weren't shooting stars. They were way up out of the Earth's atmosphere. They were amongst the stars. My wife noticed one first zipping out in outer space amongst the stars. She saw it. She pointed out to me. We watched it. We looked over and we saw another one. So we saw about 5 of these anomalies. So I was all excited because my first thought is, what do we think when we see things in the sky? We think UFOs. So I was all excited. I had never seen a UFO. I'd always been into paranormal, UFOs, spirituality, NDEs, all that, but I had never experienced any of it. So I was so excited. So I just couldn't stop talking about it. I was just so giddy and I was just in awe of it. So we head back to the hotel. On the way back, my left arm started up again with the numbness and the tingling and it locked. And I was like, something's going on here. This is not normal. And it's on my left side. So I started getting concerned. So I told my wife about it. I said, let me tell you about this. Just make note of it. If something happens, I want you to be aware of it. Okay. So once we get back to the room, that strange, eerie feeling. Something's going on here. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was something in the air. There was something just not right. Um, so we get comfortable. We lay down in bed. We're talking. Now the TV's on. We're fully awake. So we weren't dreaming. We didn't wake up from a dream. We weren't tired. We weren't asleep. We were talking. We were fully engaged. So my left side starts up again. My left side starts to tingle. This time it is accompanied with severe pain. My left arm begins to shake. My whole left side begins to hurt. My heart begins racing and pounding with a severe pain in my chest. So I'm like, okay, oh my God. So I turned to my wife and I said, her name is Wanda. I said, Wanda, I think I'm having a heart attack. I think I may be dying. So at this point, in my mind, I'm expecting her, what do you do when you hear something like that? You normally get on the phone, call 911, blah, blah, blah. She didn't do any of that. She had told me later, as we talked about the incidents, but I'll fill it in, that when I said that to her, she heard a voice tell her to lay down and get in position. And she had no idea what that meant, what position meant. She just did it. She lay down, she got in position, she laid on my right side, grabbed my right arm, and we were locked. Arms were locked like this, and our arms were bent at the elbow. But we were both laying on our back on the bed. So this pain started getting worse and worse. Now, at this time, I start praying to God. Now, the funny thing about it is I'm unable to talk because I'm shaking. I'm in pain. I can't even speak at this point. This is the interesting part, is that at this point, my wife and I began to hear each other's thoughts. We began to communicate telepathically. Mm-hmm. Now, we've been together 25 years. We've been married 25 years. We had never talked telepathically. We never even tried. So this was like, we're talking telepathically. She can hear my prayers to God. Okay. She can hear my prayers. So as I'm getting worse and unable to talk, I'm praying to God. Now, I heard God's voice 3 times during this incident. The first thing he said to me was, "You've wasted enough time." Now, the thing about that is I knew exactly what he meant, because as I said earlier, I was told, okay, it's time to put yourself out there with your spiritual coaching business. And I remember I said I didn't do it. I was regressing. I was delaying. I didn't want to do it. I started getting fear and all that. He said, "You've wasted enough time." So at this point, I started praying to God. God, please, I'm sorry. I understand. I know my calling. Please give me another chance. Now, as I'm praying and as I'm begging, I'm starting to feel my soul detach from my body. Mm-hmm. I'm feeling myself, my life or my life force weakening. I feel myself slowly moving towards death. So my wife said to me, which I never heard her use this word, she said, we're transcending. Now, mind you, she said this telepathically. She said, we're transcending. So I thought about it. I was like, transcending. So we're dying together. And she said, I feel the pains too. So she had started feeling my pain. And I don't know if this was her pain, or she was feeling my pain, or if it was her separate pain. I don't know. But she said, I feel it also. I'm getting the pains also on my left side. So then I thought to myself, oh my gosh, we're dying together. We're dying. We're gonna die together. We're dying together. So I don't know. You have no concept of time when you're going through something like this. So I don't have no idea how long this went on. So I kept praying. But as I was getting weaker, I realized my prayers weren't doing any good. I was steadily fading. So at this time, I kind of said, okay, I'm begging God, I'm pleading with God, it's not doing good. So at that point, I was ready to give in. So I said in my mind, I'm just going to give in to this. At least we're dying together. At least we'll die together. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. As soon as I said that to myself, my wife telepathically said to me, Steven, fight. Don't give up. So when she said that, that gave me a second win. Mm-hmm. At this time, I heard God say for the second time, he said to me, all this information and knowledge I've given you, and this is what you're doing with it. This is what you've done with it. And I felt so bad because I knew exactly what he was saying. Because during my spiritual awakening, I was receiving so many downloads from God, so many messages, so many things that weren't of me, so many things that I had never heard of before. And I would research, and he was opening me up to so many things, giving me all this knowledge, preparing me for my calling. So I started begging again. God, I understand. I know my calling. I know what I came here to do before I incarnated here. I know I agreed to this. So it's not just a calling, it's something that I agreed to do before I came here. I begged, God, please don't do this. Don't do this. Don't let me die here on a bed in a hotel room, please. This can't be how it ends. It can't be. Please don't. Now, my wife later revealed to me, as we talked about it, that she only heard God once. And she heard a voice. God said to her, "And why should I leave you here?" And she said his tone was kind of sarcastic, like a sarcastic tone, yet firm. And she only said one word. She said, "Jordan," which is our son. That's the only time that she heard a voice during our NDE, because we were having a joint NDE. But it hit me a lot harder because the calling was more so on me. So as I'm begging and pleading, again, now I'm beginning to call on Jesus. I'm calling on Jesus. Nothing's working. Now I see myself going through space, going through darkness. First it's darkness, not space. Then it's space. Then I'm out amongst the stars in the universe. So I'm seeing the stars. Then after I went from darkness to going through space, that's when I began to see the white light that so many people talk about during their NDEs. And I said, oh my God, I'm heading towards the white light and I'm fading fast. Nothing I'm doing is working. So at this time, I began to give in again because I figured, okay, God's heard my prayers. Nothing's working. I've called on Jesus. I've told God, I know my calling. Please give me another chance. But I'm steady fading. Now I'm starting to head towards the light. So I begin to give up again. As I begin to give in again, and I'm totally fine with giving in to death. And I think the main reason that I fought wasn't because I had a fear of death or fear of hell, or I don't believe in hell or anything like that. I was fighting because of I didn't want to leave my wife. I didn't want to leave without fulfilling my calling and doing what I was supposed to do. I didn't want to go out in that manner. I didn't want to leave my son, my mother. So I wasn't scared of death for me. I was scared of death for other reasons, for those reasons. So as I'm about to give in totally, telepathically, I said, I don't even know why I said this. I said, it didn't even seem like me. I said, Wanda, help me. And it's funny. I called on her for help. It was like a last ditch effort to call for some reason. So as I called on her for help, during the whole time when I was hearing her prayers and she was communicating with me and I was hearing her prayers telepathically, this is the first time that during the event that either one of us talked audibly out loud. So when I asked her for help, please help me, she sat up in the bed and she began to speak in tongues. Now, we had been together 25 years. This is probably the second or third time I've heard her speak in tongues. So I've heard this before. So when I heard it, it didn't surprise me because I had heard it before. So, but now you know how sometimes when you hear somebody, but you're not really listening. So I can hear her now, but as I heard her, I went back to praying. Now this is the third and the last time I heard the voice. As I was praying and I wasn't really listening to her, although I heard it, God told me, he said, Steven, be quiet and listen to your wife. And I was like, okay. A calm came over me. I was coherent. I looked to my right. As soon as I looked to my right, she stopped praying in tongues and she began speaking and chanting in African languages. Now, my wife and I been together 25 years. The only language we know, I can assure you, is English. She starts speaking in African languages. Now, I know an African language. I know Italian. I know Spanish when I hear it. I don't know what the words mean, but you know the tone. You could tell what it is. She starts speaking in an African language, and she starts chanting and speaking fluently. So I'm like, oh my God! So I'm focused on her and I'm listening, and now I'm blown away. I can't believe this. I'm like, This, everything you would think, this doesn't make sense. I don't understand it. How could this be? All of that we think in our rational mind. But you got to understand something. The spirit world doesn't work on our on our worldly thoughts. You when you try to comprehend things from a worldly view, you try to you understand spiritual concepts, you're never going to get it like that. She goes from one African language to another, chanting and speaking. Now, I'm going to assume, I think it's safe to say, I don't know for sure, that she was praying, she was praying in these African languages. She spoke 3 different African languages, chanting and praying. Then she goes from the three African languages, and she starts speaking in Indian language. I don't know if it was Hindu or Sikh or what, but I know it was Indian. She starts speaking in Indian language and doing Indian chants fluently. And I'm like, oh my God. Oh my, I'm blown away. I cannot believe this. I cannot believe this. Now, the funny thing is, when she started doing that, all of my prayers, my calls to God, telling him I know my calling, telling him to give me another chance, all that stuff, none of that stuff worked. It was only when she began praying to me and I guess interceding and praying in those other languages where that's when I felt my soul being slowly returned to my body and coming back into my body and moving away from the white light, back through space, back through the darkness and back into my body. That's her prayers brought me back. So afterwards, I got up, I looked over at her and she was in a trance. You know how you see somebody and they're like a daze, like they're asleep, but their eyes are open. She was in a trance. So I didn't want to say anything to her. I didn't want to bother her. I realized later on, oh my gosh, God actually told me to be quiet and hush so I could be a witness to her speaking these languages, so that I could have a testimony and it's almost like I got from that, was like, I want to prove to you this is real. This is not a dream. It's not lucid dreaming. You're not hallucinating, because there's no way that your wife could speak these languages unless this was real. And I want you to be quiet and focus in on this, and so you could be a witness to this. So I began pacing the floor. I started thinking about the day. I started thinking about the events. I'm pacing the floor. So go back to the hill and seeing the anomalies in the sky. It was brought to me, Stephen, those weren't UFOs. Those are your angels. Those were your angels that were near. Now, that's all I know. I wasn't told why they were near, what they were doing, anything. My guess is, and what I get from it was, obviously they knew the events to come. And I guess they were near. They were close. They were showing themselves. You know what I mean? They were showing themselves to us. But Stephen, they weren't UFOs. Those were your angels. So I'm pacing the floor trying. I look over my wife. I can see she's coming out of it. I ask her about it. Do you know what just happened? Do you realize that you just spoke in different languages? Do you know that? And at first she didn't remember it. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea what you're talking about. As time went on, slowly it started coming back to her. She said, okay, yes, I do remember. I have no idea what I said. It didn't even feel like me. It felt like I was being, I don't like to use the word possessed because it has a negative connotation. You know what I mean? But she was taken over by the spirit. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
So we've ever since then, and that happened in October, I had a lot of signs and synchronicities from my spirit guides and angels. My third eye, for 2 or 3 weeks after that, wouldn't stop tingling. It wouldn't stop vibrating. You know, little pains, little tinglings, little vibrations. And it just opened me up. This spiritual experience opened me up even more. And that gave me the confidence, like, okay, you know, I've had an outer body experience before where I saw the light and felt the love. You know, people always talk about the love and the light and feeling that. And I agree. God is love. And of course, unconditional love, the most unconditional love that you can experience. But this experience for me, this NDE, everybody's NDE is different. They go through it for a different reason. This was more like a spanking, like say, okay, you know, you need a little bit of tough love. You've been told what to do. You know your calling. You need to stop playing around and get to it. Don't worry about it. Stop fearing. You have the support of the universe. You have the support of the angels. You have the support of me. Stop thinking that you're not enough. Get out there and do what you're supposed to do. So, needless to say, ever since October, I've had a fire lit under me where I've really taken that to heart, because this is something that I'm not going to play around with. I feel like God's giving me a second chance, and I'm not going to fool around and think that he's going to give me a third, because you know what I mean? Because I don't know, because it's almost like he was saying to me, if you're not going to do what you're going to do, you've wasted so much time and so many years over your life. and you haven't come into this, it's almost like, well, what are you here for? What do I need to keep you here for? It doesn't make, if you're not going to do it, step into this and do what you need to do, you don't need to be here. That's the feeling I got from it. So, needless to say, ever since then, I've been a different person. It's changed me to realize that when it comes to spiritual coaching, it doesn't, your degrees, your certificates, all your wisdom, reading books, all knowledge, all that's great, but nothing beats experience. I've realized I've been through a spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul, now NDE. I've lived it and I've experienced it, and nothing beats experience. So now that's given me the confidence and given me the swift kick I need to get going and get over that fear, to get over those limited thoughts, to realize I have the universe supporting me and my calling, and I need to get to it.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing all that, Stephen. And you
Yes.
have answered a question, my very first question that I was going to ask you, because a lot of people that have had near-death experiences, um, that usually leads to their spiritual awakening from the stories that I've heard. But in your
Exactly.
case, it seems like it was reversed. You had your spiritual awakening first, and
Yes.
then the NDE. And you've also answered another question that I wrote down that I wanted to ask you is, what motivated you to share it so early? Because a
Yeah.
lot of people, when they have these experiences, they're so worried about, being shut down, or they are actually shut down, when they start talking about it.
Yeah.
And this fear of nobody believing them or judging them, and myself included, I've had a series of spiritual transformative
Yes.
experiences, and I didn't talk about it for many years. And I
Right.
think it's that fear that holds us back. But you answered that question because I was going
Yeah.
to ask you what lit that fire, and you answered it. I mean,
Yeah.
your NDE is very, very unique. Everybody's is unique, but yours is different.
It is, and I will say this is that I had someone else ask me that also. How could you speak about it so soon? And a lot of people hold on to that, like you said, they hold on to these experiences for years until they feel comfortable, until they know they're not alone, or until they have time to process it for whatever reason. But with me, for that 2 years leading up, going through that spiritual awakening first, watching NDEs on YouTube, researching the paranormal, going through
Mhm.
the spiritual awakening, the dark night of the soul. Once I had it, and once I heard God's voice, it everything made sense to me. He's like, because when he said to me, "You've wasted enough time," I knew exactly what he meant. I knew it was time for me to get out there and do what I need to do, and I was stalling. I didn't want to do it. I was scared. The fear. What are people going to think? Am I good enough? What are people going to say? Worried about judgment. All those things that keep us from stepping into our path and purpose.
Mhm.
So for me, it was a lot easier to deal with because I had been through my spiritual awakening, dark night of the soul, and I knew my calling. And it's almost
Mhm.
like, okay, now it's like this ND happened not for the spiritual awakening or bring me to the light. It happened to get me going to like, okay, you're calling, you're stalling, you're starting to revert and going back to some old way, you're running from it. And I want to assure you that you can do this, that you're being supported, and it's time to step into this and stop fooling around.
Mhm. And that's really, really important, Stephen.
Yes.
And there's so much to unpack in your story, I mean, even with your wife being beside you and having that shared experience. So
Yes.
that's pretty incredible also. And, from it sounds like she tapped into all of your um, everything that you were going through, including that physical pain. Um,
Yes.
and
Yes.
even, when you were talking about the gift, the speaking in tongues, that also resonated with me because
Mm.
there was a time in my life, and even now, sometimes that language just pours out. And it
Yes.
always brings me so much peace. So the calm
Yes.
that came over you is very good
Yes.
to, yes, absolutely. And then, speaking about your spiritual awakening, before and then this experience, so do you feel that there's been a shift again for you? Like, the first shift came with your spiritual awakening, right? And
Yes.
then with this incident, like, how would you describe how you feel now? Like, just that.
I think for me, it didn't really, the NDE didn't really change me spiritually. It How it changed me was the purpose of this NDE was to eliminate the fear, to
Mhm,
realize that you have been called, God is with you,
mhm,
you're supported by the universe. This is your calling. Get over your fear. Get over worried about judgment. get over worried about what people say, what people think. I was basically told I've had a lot of downloads since this has happened. Basically, the universe, God has told me, you put yourself out there, the people that it resonates with, the people that want and need the help, it'll resonate with, and who you're meant to help, they will come to you. Don't worry about the naysayers. There's always going to be doubters. This didn't happen. This doesn't add up. This doesn't make sense. And a lot of people won't get it, because if you're trying to think of, like I said earlier, if you're trying to think about spiritual concepts, mysteries, events in a logical, rational, worldly fashion, there's no way you can wrap your head around it, because that's not how the spirit world works. You have to elevate your thinking, elevate your frequency, elevate your vibration to better understand these things, not thinking of them as a physical and trying to put logic to it. You're always going to doubt it like that. It's never going to make sense to you. So for me, it was more so, look, you're a light worker, you're a star seed, you've been called, you need to get into this and stop worried about the fear and the judgment. Stop worried about not being enough, or feeling that you're not enough, or that you need more education, or that it's too much work. You have the support of the universe here. And it's almost like, I'm giving you this experience to show you that, to get you over that hump.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are very encouraging words. For so many of us are going through that right now, Stephen. So
Yes.
I'm really glad you said that.
Yes.
And I do have another question, because a lot of us, as you said very rightly, we start losing some of our friends, as we start growing, and shifting, things shift in our lives. So
Mm-hmm.
do you feel, because you did mention you came from a Christian background, do you feel that some of the things that you're experiencing was well accepted with it, if you were part of a community or a church, or has that been a struggle? Because it was for me, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, it's been a struggle, and it's been a struggle with family and friends that don't understand, that it doesn't resonate with, that are still stuck in that limited belief system, those mental and social constructs, that a lot of that religious dogma that keeps us handcuffed and keeps us trapped spiritually,
Mhm.
where we can't evolve. And for me, and it's funny, because during my spiritual awakening, I went back to the church, because that's all I knew. I didn't know where to go. I had no idea where to go. I said, let me go back to the church. Try to talk to a pastor. He really didn't understand it. He really didn't get it. He was just like, well, just accept Jesus and know Jesus. And I know and accept Jesus, and I love Jesus, and I love his teachings. But it's more than just that. It's a shift in consciousness. It's a shift in your thought process. And for me, nobody could relate to it. And
Mhm.
and I tried to stay in my old ways, and like I said, it didn't resonate anymore. It wouldn't resonate with my soul. So
Mhm.
it's very hard to have to let go of some people. I try my best to explain it to them, and I send them information to try to be able to kind of get it. But I've had some friends that I'm not friends with anymore. I don't know if it intimidates them, if they think I'm crazy, or what it is. But that's not for me to worry about. I have a path and a purpose and a mission, and there's people out there that I need to help, and that's what I need to focus on.
Yeah, we definitely have that in common then. My
Yes.
spiritually transformative experiences were actually with Jesus, but it was
Yes.
not received by my church community because it didn't seem to align with the dogmas. And so,
Right.
I did end up losing a lot of friends. So that's why I asked, because that part of the journey, I think, is so hard for so many of us. And I
Yes.
think that also may be one reason why we play small, in the beginning, anyways,
Yes.
because you're coming up against that friction constantly, right? But you
Yes.
said something very beautiful, that the universe, God, they all equip us. We're
Mm-hmm.
not alone. We definitely
No.
are not alone. And
No.
you're helping people with your coaching. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But can you elaborate a little bit on your process when you're working with people and helping them to connect with themselves or with God?
Yes.
What tools do you use, and how do you do that?
Yes. Basically, there's so much to that, but basically, what I do, what I've found is, when people come to me and they say, I can't connect. I don't feel the connection. I'm not getting the messages. I'm not getting the signs. I'm not getting the answers from God, from the universe, from my spirit team, from my spirit guides, and whatnot. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But I find with most people, one of the main things, I'll just say this, is helping people to become self-aware. Because we have to realize is that when we hold on to low vibration and low frequency thoughts, feelings, and emotions, they block and interfere with our connection. The universe, God obviously operates on a high level, a high frequency, unconditional love, gratefulness, love, peace, joys. And if we have these low vibrational frequencies, thoughts, feelings, and emotions, jealousy, envy, unforgiveness, being judgmental,
Mhm.
whatever it is, we all have ours, and it's specific to different people. If we don't realize and learn to be self-aware and to face those, because a lot of people either don't face them, they don't look at them, they don't try to analyze them and do the shadow work to overcome them. And I kind of equate it to a car. You know how when you take a car to get an oil change, you know what they do? They drain the old oil before they put new oil in. And I
Mm.
find a lot of people saying, well, you know what? I practice yoga, I do meditation, I do sound baths, I do earthing, and all that's great, and all that's vital for connection, for slowing our mind, calming our mind, and getting connected. But if you don't deal with the hindrances, the things that are blocking and keeping your
Mhm.
vibration on a low level, you're not
Mhm.
self-aware of them, you're not acknowledging them, you're not identifying them and dealing with them, we're
Mhm.
always going to have those blockages. And I kind of equate it to Wi-Fi. You know how we're buffering. You know when you try to listen to your favorite song or TV show or whatnot, and it's buffering and bits and pieces of it play. I try
Mhm.
to tell people we want to stop that spiritual buffering. We want that show, that music to play continuously, and to do that, we have to eliminate a lot of those blockages and hindrances that we may be consciously aware of, or we may not even be consciously aware of. So that's one of the things that I try to identify with people is, if you're being blocked and you're not feeling connection, you have some blockages that need to be identified, that you need to face, that we need to get the bottom up, to raise that vibration, to get out of that low vibrational state, whatever that may be. And that varies amongst people.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, I think that's actually very, appropriate. I've been a nutritional therapist for 10 years, and one of the examples that also popped in my head, Stephen, was when I ask people to clean out their diets, right? Like if we don't
Right.
clean out the processed foods, it doesn't matter how healthy we eat, we're constantly inputting those toxins. So
Yes.
I hear you. What are like some of the common blockages or common hindrances that you may find when you're working with folks? Yeah.
Well, there's a lot, but some that come to mind is, one is a big one is not living in the present, not being mindful, not
Mm.
living in the present. If we're so consumed and worried about the future, and we're so much regretting and living in the past, what I would have, could have, should have done, and what didn't work out, and what I should have said, and how I should have handled that situation, and we're still reliving past traumas, living in the past, or we're overly consumed with living in the future. I tell people one reason amongst many that you're not getting the signs, you're not hearing the messages, is because the universe, obviously, God communicates in the present. It doesn't commute. You have to be present and living in the present to receive. And if you're too consumed with the future or with the past, you're going to miss a lot of those messages, because the universe is always trying to guide us and nudge us along the right path, and trying to
Mhm.
give us synchronicities and signs. But the universe is very subtle. It's not going to force you to do anything. It's not going to interfere with your free will. But if you're so consumed and don't understand how to slow your mind, live in the present, and it's very easy. And I tell people, when you're doing your dishes, when you're doing your chores, be mindful of the water,
Mhm.
the texture of the water, the heat, the how does the cup feel, the smells, the sights, the sensations. Focus on your surroundings and be aware of your situation, and take those all in. What do you see? What do you smell? How are you feeling? When you're out and about, notice the colors, notice the trees, notice the sounds. All of that stuff keeps you in the present. So now when you're more in tune with the present, that keeps us out of worrying about the future as much. That
Mhm.
keeps us out of regretting the past. And now you're more in tune with the universe to receive those messages. Because like there's a saying, if you're living in the past, that's a memory. If you're living in the future, that's a dream. The only thing that's real is the present and the now.
Yes, thank you so much, Stephen. Yeah, absolutely. I could go on and on with my
Yes.
questions, but I do want to respect your time as well. But I do want people to know where they can find you. In the show notes, I will include all of the links that you've given me, but what's the best way to reach you?
The best way to reach me would be to go through my website, which is, my website is spiritual alignment, and then my initials SL. So it's the spiritual alignment SL.com. And on there, you'll find a link to my Facebook, to my LinkedIn, and you'll also be able to email me directly. So that's how you can reach me. You'll hear more. I have my story on there. I have a lot of what I offer, what I do, and like I said, a spiritual coach's job is not to fix you. It's not to give you all the answers. It's not to make everything right. It's to help you realize that you have the power. The answers are within you. It's bringing out that inner power where you connect with your higher self, with God, with the spirit realm, and you receive those answers.
Mm-hmm.
But there's certain ways we have to do that. Eliminating social and mental constructs, living in the present,
Mm-hmm.
getting rid of low vibrational feelings, thoughts, and emotions that are hindering. And also the biggest thing is to be able to be unlimited, to be able to think outside of that box of what you've been taught or what you think you know. Because I tell people, if you limit yourself, you're limiting the universe also and what the universe can do. So that's very important.
But thank you so much for sharing all of that wisdom, Stephen. Certainly, when I think about it, this is very empowering what you do, because a lot of times when we're exploring spirituality, the first place we begin with is some sort of a religion or some sort of a, philosophy or mindset. But very soon we're told what to believe rather than taught
Yes.
how to think or how to find that power. So I
Yes.
really appreciate what you're doing, Stephen. And I really want to thank you for taking the time to come and speak on this show today.
Yes. Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will look forward to connecting with you on LinkedIn and Facebook. Thank
Okay.
you.
Appreciate it. Look forward to it. Thank you.